Hi, I'm Rachel Grimm, and welcome to the podcast With All Your Mind. I'm here to help us understand the Bible with cultural and historical context, linguistic info, and other cool stuff. Enjoy. All right, guys, welcome back. This is Rachel, and this is With All Your Mind. And I'm recording in the morning again. I'm getting lots of opportunities to record in the morning, and I'm taking them, and I like it. I'm going to have to do this more often when my boys are in school. I don't like recording in the afternoon. I'm more tired. I feel like words don't come out of my mouth very easily, probably because I've been corralling my herd of cats all morning. Anyway, so I told you guys a couple of weeks ago that we're on YouTube now. And we don't know, and by we, I mean me and my technical team of Ryan, we don't know how it would work, but we were curious. Would you ever want video? Like if I could put video up on YouTube along with the podcast? We're not sure about it yet. But I'm just curious about whether that would be something that people would want or not. So let me know. Send me a text or an email. My email is always in the show notes. All right. We are moving on to the next part of the genre. We're moving into the New Testament now. We did 3 different genres for the Old Testament: the Torah, which was the law, and the Nevi'im, which is the prophets, and then the writings, the Kotvim. So 3 for the Old Testament, and we talked about some subcategories in there. And now we're going to do 3 for the New Testament. This is not like a total comprehensive every kind of genre that appears in the Bible, but we do mention some subcategories and some that are going to kind of bleed over into each other. We're going to do 3 for the New Testament. This is the first one. We're going to do the Gospels, and then we're going to do the epistles, and finally apocalyptic literature. And apocalyptic literature bleeds over a little bit with prophetic literature. It's some really good stuff. I found some interesting stuff about all of those different genres, so hang in with us and we'll go through it all. So this one, the Gospels, the first 4 books of the New Testament: Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Probably the most famous books of the Bible, the most often read, the most often talked about and taught about and preached about. And I really wasn't sure what to talk about with those because they're the most talked about. Everybody talks about them. But we still found stuff, so it's good stuff. So the first 3 of the Gospels are called the Synoptic Gospels, and that word comes from Greek because everything comes from Greek. Because they're called that because they have similar material. They tend to have the same stories, similar perspectives. John's Gospel is not called that because it's a little different in that he spends a lot of time on an introduction that goes outside the typical for a gospel. And altogether, he has a different structure. So if it feels different, it is, yeah, you're right. It is different. This, like I said, was my least favorite genre to talk about because it felt so obvious and so vague at the same time until I started researching. And I was like, what is gospel? Like, what is this genre? Is it historical narrative? Like, we keep on mentioning that genre without, spending a whole episode on it. But it feels like there's more to it than that. And yeah, there is. So there's some debate on what exactly type of genre is Gospels, but it's basically a Greek type of biography. It follows a lot of similar styles as Greek biographies had. And academics and scholars, Bible scholars, have debated, like, was the Gospel a new type of Jewish literature? And some say yes, and some others say, well, it's just like Greek biography. But basically, it's a biography of Jesus. And the next question you would have to ask is why? Why have 4 different biographies of Jesus? Number 1, proof. Proof of who he was, what he said, what he did. Details about what he did, what he said, and who he was. And a historical record of all of that. What you may not know, and maybe you do, this is something I've heard a lot, but maybe not for you. All 4 Gospels focus on different aspects of Jesus' life and have different styles. Matthew, he was the tax collector. He's an accountant. He goes for facts, but also details. Mark, he's all about the action. He is short and to the point. If you want to read a gospel and don't want to read that many words, read Mark. Luke is the doctor, and he gives personal details. He's the one with the birth story and where it happened and what exactly happened. John is the sensitive guy, and he goes for deeper concepts. I've heard it said that he's the most mystical. I really don't like that term because to me, he's not mystical. He's just a deep thinker, a really good thinker. But did you also know that each gospel focuses on different aspects of who Jesus is? The general consensus is that each gospel writer portrays Jesus in a certain way. Matthew strives to show that Jesus is qualified to be and is the Messiah. Mark shows Jesus as a servant. Luke focuses on Jesus' humanity, his human side. And John shows that Jesus is not only all of those things, but it is also the Son of God. And we have a good podcast episode on John's use of the word logos and how it connects back to Genesis 1. That's season 3, episode 7. So if you're interested in John and how he talks, listen to that episode. We're going to start talking about some features of Gospels. And one feature that you'll see in a couple of different Gospels is genealogies. I wanted to talk about genealogies back when we were talking about the Torah because there's lots of genealogies in Genesis, but I wanted to keep it for the Gospels because they feature there too. So there are genealogies of Jesus in both Matthew and Luke. So, Joseph was the son of, and blah, blah, blah was the son of, and all the way back, right? These are the genealogies. But they don't agree with each other. And they don't agree with Old Testament genealogies. Matthew and Luke sometimes disagree about certain ancestors, and sometimes they leave out whole chunks of the genealogies from the Old Testament. So you have to talk about why. And I've heard different theories about this. One main theory is that Matthew's genealogy focuses on Mary's side of the family, which is almost never the case with Jewish genealogies. And then Luke's focuses on Joseph's family, or vice versa. I'm not sure which way it goes. So there's just different theories on why this is the case. But let's first talk about why have genealogies in the Bible in the first place? Why were they important to the Jewish people? Well, they were kind of legal. They had legal purposes. One was to prove land ownership. Land ownership was given according to tribe and according to family. You had to prove who you were to show ownership rights to your land. You could not do that without a genealogy. Another thing was the ability to hold certain offices was tied to genealogy. You could not be a priest, you could not be a Levite, and you could not be a king without having a certain genealogy. And last of all, proof of being a Jew at all. Where you could go in the temple depended on whether you were a Jew or not. That's why they had the court of the Gentiles. That's where women and all Gentiles, all non-Jewish men, had to stay outside a certain limit, and only Jewish men could go in past that. How did you prove that? Genealogy. There was not they didn't have a green card saying, hey, I'm a Jew, okay? So genealogies were important for a lot of facets of normal life. Your land, perhaps your job, and your participation in the temple. But Matthew and Luke's genealogies, and here's something that is usually not taught, are not lawful. They would not work for these purposes because they are not complete. They are not legally useful genealogies. Jesus could not walk into the temple with the genealogy that's presented in Matthew or Luke and say, hey, I can go in here, or hey, I can own this land based on this genealogy. Nope, he would be turned down. Matthew's genealogy might be symbolic. And if you know the guy, Michael Heiser, Ryan is a huge Michael Heiser fan, and for good reason. And I am too. I don't listen to his podcast, and he passed away, I think, 1.5 years, almost 2 years ago now. But still, huge amounts of great information. And I think I have one of his books listed in the show notes as a resource for, I think, one of the other things I'm going to talk about. But he suggests, and other people do too, that Matthew's genealogy is symbolic And Heiser calls it playful. And that's because there are 3 groups of 14 names, and the number 14 is associated with David. And Matthew is the guy that is trying to show what? That Jesus is qualified to be and is the Messiah, the son of David. Only the son of David could be the Messiah. So Heiser calls it a playful and symbolic genealogy to show that Jesus can be and is the Messiah. So these are not lawful genealogies, and perhaps the way it is arranged was an artful design for a very specific purpose. So what you know about genealogies is true, that they show somebody's lineage and they are for legal purposes and blah, blah, blah. Yes, that's true. It's just not applicable to what's in the Bible, right? So if anybody says, oh, the genealogies don't line up and, the facts in the Bible are wrong, and you can say, no, they were designed to be that way. They were designed to show specific facts, such as the one in Matthew could be designed to just exemplify how Jesus was both a descendant of David, and the arrangement of the genealogy itself refers back to David. So you can do that. All right, the next feature we're going to talk about is parables. It's another major feature of the Gospels. Jesus uses them a lot, and we have a lot of them in the Bible. Jesus explains why he uses them in Matthew 10, because even the disciples were confused. They knew what they were. They weren't saying, what is this? What are you talking about? They knew what parables were, but they didn't know why Jesus was using them. So after Jesus tells the parable of the sower, this is what we have. This is out of Matthew 10. The disciples came to him and asked, why do you speak to the people in parables? He replied, because the knowledge of the secrets of the kingdom of heaven has been given to you, but not to them. Whoever has will be given more, and they will have an abundance. So this is why I speak to them in parables. And he did this to fulfill a prophecy out of Isaiah. You will be ever hearing, but never understanding. You'll be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Okay, so that's Jesus explaining why he uses parables. It's because he needed to be a little confusing to certain people. So now we know the reason. He spoke that way so it would be harder to understand him. But do you know what a parable is? The Greek word is parabole. I've heard pastors teach on that word, and they talk about how it's to cast alongside, to lay a saying alongside a truth. Yeah, but that's the Greek word. Did you know that parables are mentioned in the Old Testament too? The Hebrew word for it is mashal, and it can refer to all kinds of sayings. So it doesn't always say parable when that word is translated. It can mean oracle when somebody is giving a prophecy. Sometimes it uses that word mashal. It can mean proverb. It can mean saying. And it can mean parable. So it depends on the translation that you're looking at, how they translate that word mashal. And it depends on the context, what kind of saying it is. But proverbs and parables were definitely used in the Old Testament, such as, and here's a very obvious example of a parable, when Nathan comes to David after David committed adultery with Bathsheba. And David went off the deep end, had Uriah killed. He just gets deeper and deeper into trouble. And God tells Nathan to go to David with this story. And Nathan tells the story of a rich man that had whatever he wanted, and a poor man that had one little sheepy in his house that his kids loved, and they slept with it. It was their pet. And then the rich man came along, and he had a guest coming to him, and he wanted to throw him a dinner, but he didn't want to kill any of his animals. So he went to the poor man's house, ripped away this precious little lamb, and cooked it for supper. And David was outraged by it. And Nathan said, "You are that man," right? That's a parable. That's a parable. And so I think we just understand the parables in the Old Testament better. And so we don't even think of them as parables so much. But the moral of the story is sometimes Jesus was mysterious with the disciples. and he's sometimes mysterious with us too. And so Jesus has not changed. Okay. That's what I get out of that. All right. So there you have it. There's the Gospels. It's a Greek biography and it has some features. It can have a little artsy feature in there with those genealogies. And parables are not a New Testament feature. They're actually a feature of the Old Testament as well. All right, we're going to stop there. Hope you guys have a great day, and I'll see you later. Bye.